Yay.
All right.
All right.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to my personal out-of-body experience here. If you've ever done anything like a webinar, and I've only done a few, it's a fairly bizarre experience because there's really zero feedback. And so I just kind of stare at my monitor and hope I'm saying something valuable and keeping people awake along the way. Um, So I appreciate Ann and the Professional Development Committee asking me to do this. I'm happy to talk about what we pulled off over the last year anyway, year and a half. Um, it was a bit of a long road, and I'll try to go through the specifics. The purpose of my presentation this morning is really kind of describe, how we did this from a very ground level. So there are lots of details, and I'll try not to kill you too bad with all the granular details, but it does, I think, illustrate what it takes at a very ground level to make a shift like this, and a little bit about why we did it too. Because I have way more to go through than I have time to go through, we'll just kind of get started. So we decided yeah, early on that we had been virtually the same career office for a long, long time. And I had a thought, gosh, maybe a decade ago, that there might be a better way. Didn't work out at that point, but it did work out later on, which I'll get into. And so I decided that based on what I'm reading out there in the national scope, and what our institution was going through, it seemed to be a good time to really take a look at what career services at Oswego was going to be all about. The NACE article here really kind of got into that a little bit, and they highlighted some things that Rutgers was doing with their career cluster model, which I found very interesting. And as you recall, they got some pretty good airplay on this. There's also some other articles, for example, in Spotlight that talked more about what Rutgers was trying to pull off. And like I said, it really got my attention. So we decided to give Rutgers a call, and I'm jumping around a little bit in the timeline. It's not exactly a linear chronology that I'm working with here, but it works kind of functionally for the discussion. And we came up with some basic questions about um, what we wanted to learn from our time on the phone with Rutgers. And that was really the first real step we took into this process. About the same time, you probably recognize these folks as, what I would consider some of the thought leaders in our profession right now. And they were writing some really interesting articles about the future of career services. It wasn't quite as abrupt as career services must die, etc. And I thought it was very affirming, and really kind of outlined a bit of a tectonic shift in our profession. I don't know if anybody has caught the Chronicle lately, but Christine had another highlighted article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, where she was highlighted in some of the things she's doing now. So very interesting stuff. Again, it all really began to get my attention. And so about the same time, my supervisor asked me, what's going on in our field in terms of best practices. Um, uh, Gerald, our vice president for student affairs and enrollment management, was new, and we kind of saw that as an opportunity. Um, and she was really asking, okay, so are you any good, frankly? And so I actually used the framework of this article to describe whether we could be any good or not within the context of this new model. And so it really got into, and I know that's a little blurry if you go to lower resolution here, but it's a new breed of professionals, was one of the 10 points they made. And what does that even mean? Customize connections, customize communities, talking about career services becoming an ecosystem rather than an office, something that would truly permeate the campus, et cetera, et cetera. And so I began to put some pieces together. Like I said, I thought of this idea about a decade ago, maybe longer, and the time wasn't right. I brought it up It didn't work out, and I put it back on a shelf for a while. Um, and then, frankly, our new vice president showed up on campus and at a meeting with all the directors in student affairs. She kind of looked us all straight in the eye and said, now is the time to try something different. Now is the time to go out and break something. And I don't expect it to be perfect. I just expect you to push the envelope. And that was pretty much music to my ears. So, uh, when I decided to do something, I try to go all the way. So if I was going to break something, I was seriously going to break it. And some converging things began to take place that added up to a real possibility that I would be able to revision, redesign career services for SUNY Oswego in a very significant way. One of those things, about the time I was really starting to get serious about this, was I needed a sports car on staff. It was a long time where it was, I don't know if any of you remember Bob Casper, former director of career services, but it was he and I, and it was pretty much the Gary and Bob show. And we tried to do the best job we could with what we had, and had an opportunity to bring really a pretty high-speed person named Mallory Bauer. Many of you know her on campus. Pulled her out of the Carolinas, and she truly is exceptional. And I began to have some conversations with her after she had been here a while. I didn't want to freak her out in the beginning. But we go to lunch sometimes and we just kind of toss this idea around. And it became more and more apparent that this was really the direction we wanted to go. So why do this? I thought there was a better way, and I thought it would serve our major cohorts much better if I could pull this off. Um, we had a generalist model, and frankly, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'd be meeting with a history major who doesn't have a clue, and at 10 o'clock, I'd be meeting with a science major who wants to cure cancer, and at 11 o'clock, an undeclared student who's wondering why they're in college. 1 o'clock that afternoon, I'm meeting with a finance major who wants to go on Wall Street. And so, I've been at this a little while. And so I have a pretty good breadth of knowledge, and what I don't know, I can find out. But it really became apparent that if I could find somebody who actually knew something about finance personally, like that's their world, that seems like a better way to go. It would be offering our students much more meaningful assistance, deeper assistance in certain areas, and very customized service. And then if somebody could actually immerse themselves in that particular world, they could probably immerse themselves in a world of employers doing that. So I previously I work in school districts. I'm working with governmental organizations. I'm working with finance. I'm working with everybody. But if I could have somebody on staff who only works with business, their level of expertise and their level of connection to the real world, so to speak, is going to be so much greater. So things began to kind of coalesce around this idea, and it works for students because of the customized help we can give them. I had to get our vice president on board. That was an easy call. She asked me to think big. I thought big. I presented it to her, and she said, give it a shot. Right after she said, what's it going to cost me, frankly? And when I said nothing, she was even more on board with that. About the same time, I realized that we'd have several conversations with our School of Business. And, frankly, faculty up in our School of Business have been making noises about, starting their own career center and what does that look like. And fortunately, we didn't go down that road, and we've all agreed pretty much that that's not the road to go down. But this offered another solution to that question, that challenge that we had. I went out and spoke with every dean of every school at the college, initially to say, hey, what do you think about this idea? They were all very supportive because there's not a lot to argue against here in terms of more customized assistance for your students, better expertise, and someone who really works with the areas that you are an expert in as well. Staffing levels. If you're going to break up into different industry categories to serve students better, you actually have to have staff to be able to do this. When it was the Bob and Gary show, I mean, I could take half the college, he could take half the college, but I'm not sure that's a whole lot better. And my staffing levels began to rise to the point where I could actually realistically consider this. We also wanted to serve specific cohorts around campus better, whether it was our veterans or international students, students with disabilities, transfers, distance learners, whatever group that might be. We thought this would be an answer to that question. How do we offer specific groups of students very customized service? And we thought, as part of this process, we could assign certain groups of students around campus to individual staff members, in hopes that that staff member could throw some energy behind that and move those groups down the road a little bit farther. And my direct supervisor, Kathy Evans, who's assistant vice president, it was obviously critical to get her thoughts on this and ultimately get her buy-in. And so those were the groups I really had to focus on. And so it really came down to lunch one day. During orientation one summer 3 years ago, Mallory and I were in a dining hall. I remember because I can separate my life really into two categories: before that lunch and after that lunch. And so we sat down and we just chit-chatting over orientation about, career services in general and direction for the office, et cetera. And we just started counting, and we counted Mallory, and we counted me, and we counted Jackie, and then we counted Christy, and we were in the process of trying to hire who we affectionately refer to as Person X. And so that kind of gave us 5 people, and then we started counting major industries, and we both kind of looked at each other like, I think this might actually work. We actually have enough people now that we can meaningfully divide up the world of work into different categories that we can actually put some energy behind. And so that's really what happened at lunch that day, and that's really where we decided to begin to launch. Based on that, I put this together, and this really became the document I walked around campus with for about a year. And this is what I used to articulate what this model might look like. On the left, we have the entire world of work broken up into 4 industry categories. Purposely, the biggest one is the group in the middle, which are unconfirmed, undeclared students who really have no idea. The gray areas between those bubbles, they're gray on purpose because there is a lot of gray area and it can go in any number of directions. Students often don't fit neatly in these bubbles, and that's why the bubbles are all interconnected. And one arrow points off into the ether, the unknown universe, where sometimes we just as a group scratch our head and try to help that student who doesn't fit into one bubble neatly. And obviously, as everybody on the phone call knows, lots of students fit into multiple bubbles. And so there is that interplay, that intersection between our areas. And that is not as challenging as we thought it would be to manage. But we recognize that's there. The right-hand side of this is really what each industry area would provide in terms of career counseling, services, programs, connections, work with alumni, employers, faculty, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the end, it was really about unleashing each person in our office to frankly run their own mini career center. So Jackie runs Education, Public, and Human Services from beginning to end, career exploration to how to find a job and salary negotiation within those areas. So it's no longer a staff person who only focuses on self-assessment, a staff member who only focuses on employer relations. They all do it the entire continuum, except for a smaller group of students. And then therefore, I think they get really good at the entire career development process within those industries. And so this is the staff that we had to work with. Christy, Mallory, Jackie, me as professional staff, Michelle, Cindy, and Chris on the right-hand side as administrative support staff. We were still looking for who turned out to be Jennifer Rojas, Person X. And again, jumping back in time a little bit, it became very, very important, if you know this group at all, that they buy into this process. Um, I have a very vocal group, a very capable group, and they prefer, and frankly, so do I, that they be involved in major decisions affecting them in our office. And the concept of just meeting at a staff meeting and saying, "Hey, I've got an idea, and we're just going to pull this off." I'm not sure I would have survived to the end of the meeting, to be honest with you. And so it became important to get these folks to buy into this concept, because without that, this goes nowhere, to be honest with you, um, for the most part. And so my approach was to meet with them one on one strategically and have these conversations, and answer their questions. Try to handle the fear, and there was true fear in all of this, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that was my approach, and it seemed to work well. You have to know your own staff pretty well, um, how they might react to this, what might motivate them to understand this better and to buy in better, um, and then hope it just works out in the end, to be honest with you. Um, and so, obviously it did. And so we started slow, like really slow, had lots of meetings. In fact, we traded in the sports car. We all got in a minivan and we went down to New Paltz because rumor had it that New Paltz did something similar to what we were trying to pull off. And one of the greatest parts of that entire day was we were trapped in a van by ourselves going all the way to New Paltz and back. And I kind of mark that as a milestone in the development of this model, in that we were all trapped in a small location talking about this process for hours. And it really kind of gelled us around the entire concept in my mind. Um, and New Paltz was helpful. The list of questions we had became much more granular, because we had more brains on this at this point. And, we had a couple pages of questions and loads of information we wanted to know about. How does this work, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so we came back with that and we began to work with it. One other thing to mention about this, as you may go through this process, if you're interested, it's really, really important to allow staff time to process this, because we changed everything. Everything about us changed. Every person's job description changed at a fundamental level, including mine. And it became important to both celebrate what we were excited about, but even more importantly, became important to allow people to mourn the loss of their former professional career in some ways. Because when things change, things drop off, new things get added. And sometimes things that drop off really mean something to people. They identify with that. It's part of who they are professionally. And so we put together an anonymous Google Doc where people could say anything they want. And they got really excited. They're excited for higher visibility. And we want to be a best practice something or other out there. We want to have a deeper impact on our student, customized to what our students really need. So there's a lot of excitement. But frankly, there's a lot of people freaked out too. The first line there, career services, is scary for me. That says it all. If we didn't allow people to put this out there for the group to kind of chew on and for me to know, I think we would have really stepped on some serious landmines along the way. It was really important for me to know that my staff was really nervous about this. Risk and change is scary. What if we fail? How do we let go of the old way? How do we balance our attention across the entire career development perspective now? How do we trust each other? Those were big questions. And we've known each other for like years, and we're still asking these really tough questions. And so taking the time to process it that way became really important. And this is as formal a proposal as I put together to kind of walk around campus again, saying, okay, this is what we want to do. This is why we think it's a good idea. This is how we're going to break up. These are the components each person will be dealing with, challenges, timeline, and what we've done to date. And a lot of planning. And when you have staff going, yeah, sometimes strategic planning is pretty much one giant honking waste of time, which I totally get. Um, You have to be aware of that too. This is part of what they were able to share with me about their thoughts. Do not waste my time, Gary. Do not waste my time. And so it became important that we really keep that in mind as we go through this process. And so with staff buy-in, and if you know this group, they're a fairly, in my opinion, a fairly hard charging group. So we just decided to like hop on the Harleys, cast the helmet aside, and just start screaming down this road. So we traded in the minivan, and we're really going to go at this hard. If this is what we're going to do, we want to do the best job we can. And so this is one example of probably 25 whiteboards we filled up just trying to figure out our new world. It's important to know that we agreed early on that we were putting everything on the table, or on the chopping block if you prefer. Everything we do as a career office was up for grabs in terms of a decision we would make about whether we would continue or not. For example, we asked ourselves at one point in all seriousness, do we want to work with employers? I mean, that seems crazy, right? But if you're going to put it on the table, you got to put it on the table. Because in the end, everybody has to be able to say, we agree that we will work on employers. And I mean, I know that sounds kind of obvious, but we went through every possible scenario of what this could mean for us. That's a whiteboard. How are we going to deal with our phones? How are we going to deal with the many emails we've collected around our functions over the years? And how are we going to streamline that? Who's handling foot traffic, et cetera, et cetera? This is, a board with the major functions of all of our secretaries. And we shredded their job descriptions, to be honest, as we did ours. And we just looked at function. What makes sense to lump together? Because we have administrative staff that just pick things up because they like it, they're good at it, because nobody else had time for it, et cetera, et cetera. And after a while, it's just kind of this um, um, a bit of a cobbled job description that isn't really built strategically. And this is what we attempted to do with both our description and the administrative staff descriptions. And just a discussion on, okay, where are we currently, and what will our new world look like when we're done? What do we want the target to be? Because it's really pretty hard to hit a target you can't see. So that became a great focus of our discussion. Is at the end of all of this, what do we want to look like, and what do we want to accomplish? Quick example of a job description, and they all changed, but they all remain the same in one area. They all start with, within the context of, and fill in your industry, and in collaboration with other career services staff, this is what your job will be. And that is very consistent across all of our staff, including me. So when I say everybody's job description changed, truly everybody's job description changed, and we drove this concept all the way down through our internship staff as well. And we had to get to work on some very significant things, like, okay, so I'm business, what does that mean? How do we figure out what we're actually going to become experts in? Because it was really funny, as Jackie Wallace mentioned one day, and it was very obvious. She said, so we're going to tell people we're experts now, but you realize we're not experts. And it was kind of at the beginning where we were just becoming experts. And I said, yep, we're going to roll with this. At some point, you just have to take a step forward, and it will work out. We will become better at what we do. And we did that in some very strategic ways, how we will become experts and are becoming more of an expert over time. But there is that point, that weird middle ground where you launch this, but you don't know everything you need to know, maybe never will, but you have to launch anyway. And that's scary for people. A lot of these kinds of documents kept popping up. Okay, where are we now? What are the next steps? Like I said, everything that we do, we talked about. What do we want to keep exactly the way it is because it serves this purpose? What do we want to keep but change? What do we want to add? What do we want to discontinue? What do we want to begin the process of discontinuing, etc.? Most everything we did, again, went on the table for consideration. And, it looks like a short list, but every single one of these could take weeks to figure out. So this is not a kind of pull it off during the summer and let it fly that September process, at least not for us. After a while, it became important that we recognize that not all of us can be involved in all of these discussions. There just simply wasn't enough time in the day. So, we started managing by subcommittee. There was X number of staff we had to throw at this thing, and way too many things to tackle. So we put people on different subcommittees and made one person kind of the chair to keep that group moving. And they would go off, figure out what their best answer is to this particular issue or challenge or function. And then we come back as a group, report out. Everybody else would kind of chew on this process for a while. That group would go back and refine a little more. And that way we could move multiple big boulders up a hill at the same time instead of all of us moving a giant boulder each time. And that became important for us in terms of an operational model and getting things done. And that's just an example of what one committee came back with just in terms of traffic. They were responsible for, okay, how do we manage our phones? How are we going to manage foot traffic, email communication, et cetera, et cetera. Figure out what you think is the best answer. Come tell the rest of us. Let us give you feedback, and we'll move this thing forward. It's an example of secretarial duties, our administrative staff and how they broke that up. And we have 3, right? So just like staff, we only have X number of staff. We can't manage 8 industries with 5 staff necessarily. Again, we broke up everything we needed our administrative staff to do into 3 categories. If I had a 4th person, I'd be breaking it up into 4 categories. So you obviously work with what you have. And this is important too. Along the way, you have to recognize progress. You have to recognize the hard work that people are doing because it is a massive amount of hard work and soul searching to pull this off. At least it was for us. And taking time out once in a while to say, okay, let's just take stock of what we've actually accomplished. And you'll be surprised at how much you actually need to get done. And it was important for me to keep track of those things along the way so I could present our staff with, look at what we're doing together. Look at this list. And we've only been at this like 6 minutes. So good stuff there. And then it became important as we started to frame this up more and more, refine the concept, and figure out how we're going to operate. We had to really think about branding and marketing. How are we going to tell the campus that this is our new way of operating? So I came up with this really quite awesome flyer that I thought did a great job of articulating what we're all about. And I got looking at it and I was like, no, we can't do this. So we got some experts involved and we began to put together, like, for example, 2-foot by 3-foot posters on easels in our resource center out there where students enter. And my staff loves this. We're always putting them out there. Their picture is all over campus, it's on our digital signage, you name it. And so I have these posters. Anytime we do a major event, I set these posters up so students see these folks and know what they can help with. And so we have Christy, who works on Declare. Jackie then worked in education. Jenny Rojas, formerly known as Person X, brought her all the way from San Francisco, and she works with this group. And these are all customized posters. We actually took photographs of violins and cameras and built all this from scratch. Same with Mallory, business and communications. And you might notice that Mallory has 2, not only business and communications, but healthcare and STEM. That's because I don't have enough staff, to be honest with you. And, Mallory at the associate director level, I tasked her with tackling 2 major categories. And of course, she does a great job with that, but she's also anxious for me to hire a STEM person. So, as am I. And so Mallory does double duty. We changed pretty much all of our publications that we use to reflect this new model. This is kind of our Don't Cancel class back in front publication that we give faculty. If you're not going to be there, we will come in and these are the experts. Take your pick. So everything we do, we now do within the context of this model. This is just a general handout that we hand people. I do not have responsibility for a career industry or set of industries at this point. It became clear kind of early on that I needed to um, stay detached from that in order to kind of float around just slightly above this process and just see the moving parts and do that director thing, I guess. And so it really comes down to these four people work with their industries, and this is how I market it. And these are just 8.5 by 11 handouts that we go through quite a bit. Class presentations, workshops, major events, you name it, we're giving these out to students. It includes what Jenny, for example, can help students and faculty with, some of the employers that we're connected to, and how to connect with Jenny. Email, Skype, Twitter, you can book me account, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a consistent look across all industries. So people see this, they think career services A, and B, they think Jackie Wallace. This is Christy. She works on undeclared students, not necessarily employers, but all these outstanding tools she has to help students with. Hey, look, Mallory again. She loves that. And this is an example of what we hand students when we go into classes and do presentations. We allow them to select an industry they're interested in, which is kind of an important point, and I'll pause here for a second to explain this. This model is not built around what your major is for a student. It's built around what you want to do with your life. And yes, absolutely, major is oftentimes connected to that, but major is oftentimes not connected to what you want to do as a professional career. So it's really built around the life you want to live, not the major you currently have. And so we allow students to choose an industry area, or one or two or three, and they take half of that, and then they keep half of this so they know who they can connect with. And then we take this information and we go back and we actually reach out in a very customized way based on what they've responded to at the top. And that allows us to connect with people in a more personalized manner. Instead of career services saying, hey, here's a plethora of things we can do in general, it allows Jenny to say, you selected, even though, I mean, Mallory may have gone into a business class and that finance student said, I want to work on Broadway. Okay, so you collect that one, fine and performing arts. Jenny gets that, and then Jenny reaches out to that student to say, I'm your Broadway expert. And so now that student's working with Jenny, even though they might be a finance major, right? So it's industry based, not necessarily major based. Marketing to faculty became kind of important. So we put together MailChimp newsletters. Probably lots of you use those out there. And it became basically, hey, we're in this business now. This is what we can do. This is what we have done within this industry. This isn't career services in general. This is just my particular slice of the pie. And by the way, kudos to you and special thanks to you and high fives to you. And our employers are great. And this became important to really thank people for their involvement with our office in a public way. And look at all the cool companies we work with. And by the way, my name is Mallory Bauer, right? And so every industry liaison sent that out to their faculty. And that's where the major piece really has to kick in. We take our best guess. In fact, we took every major at the college and broke it up into different industry areas. And there's lots of overlap, but basically, these are your people. Treat them right, bring them along, help them in any way you can, so to speak. And we did the same thing for Jackie's folks. Mallory did another one for healthcare and STEM. Christy did newsletters, and we do those really at the end of every semester. We do one in December and then a year-long summary of what we accomplished, and thank you so much towards the end of the year. And then, of course, we wrestled with, gosh, we need a catchy tagline. And, here are all our fairly lame ideas. Inspiring dreams. Career services can help. The best is yet to come. Anyway, we kind of banged our head into a door frame for a couple weeks on this, and we ultimately ended up with something we're really happy with, which is this. And that, of course, goes on everything. Had a chance to present at ACPA last March up in Montreal. I didn't have any money for this, but our vice president got pretty excited about this. So she actually financed a big piece of this. We got Mallory up there. She hitchhiked literally her way with residents, life staff on campus who was going up there, slept on someone's floor. I don't know. But she went up there and she did a great job of presenting it on what we like to call the international stage. So good stuff there. And so we got some people working, and we're all kind of going for it. I let them pick their own motorcycle, and I picked motorcycles because I just purchased a new one about the time I was pulling this together. So I have Christy and Jenny, we have Mallory and Jackie, and then of course me, sort of at the front of the pack, so to speak. And then really the question is, did any of this work? Last year was our first full implementation year. It didn't go perfect as we knew it wouldn't, which is another great point. You know, I told people early on, we are going to screw up at some point here, and it's just not going to go well, and that's okay. And I think people need to hear that and understand that, because most people don't enjoy failure. And so you got to recognize that, yeah, well, when you try something new, you start to bust things up, and we really broke this thing up. Sometimes Humpty Dumpty doesn't go back together again just perfect, and we figure it out at that point in time. Hopefully, we don't burn the whole place down, but a few fires here and there seem to be okay. And getting your vice president on board with that concept is kind of important too. But we did have some interesting results. Just student appointments alone, I think, say it all. We wanted to offer our students a person, in fact, their person that they could connect with, that understood them, how to best help them, and that sense of identity with our office now. And our personal appointments with students kind of went through the roof, which was great. It's also challenging to take that big of a workload on in addition to everything else. So workload is something you really got to think about. We reach out to our class in great measure after they graduate, and we increased our points of contact out there significantly. 15% increase in the presentations we do out there, I think in large part because also faculty identify with someone now. When the theater faculty think career services, they do not think about me. I'm not even sure some of them know me, but they immediately start thinking Jenny Rojas. It's just a no-brainer for them now, which is great because Jenny Rojas, frankly, is career services, and that works for me. Employer relations, yeah, great stuff. When you go from one person doing employer relations to 4 or 5 people, you'll start to see some increase. Develop new online resources about career exploration, major exploration. Christy Wynn was allowed to focus like a laser beam in this area, and she pulled off, frankly, some really incredible things. Donations are up because I think we were able to articulate that what we were going to do would be more meaningful and impactful and productive for our students, our alumni, our employers, and our faculty. And so we have corporations giving us money. I spent about a year working with our development office, and we had a very generous donor hand us $30,000. And so pretty good stuff there. And some of our publications changed. We developed some interesting things this year. A new employer services program that we desperately needed, but it really came down to also articulating who their person is. I mean, if you are a school district, you're going to look at this list and go, well, yes, of course, Jackie's my person. I think I'll give her a direct call or drop her an email versus, I don't know, Jenny. So good stuff there. And we got around to telling our story at multiple conferences in these locations. It's been a lot of fun talking about the successes we've had and some of the challenges along the way, and our ability to kind of affect some meaningful change. And we've had other people kind of inquire. They've found us different ways. And it's just been a really nice discussion with other colleges out there about why we tried this, what has worked and what some of the challenges were, etc. And so I'll try to wrap this up, but a few thoughts to think about if you're actually considering this. I think timing is important. Do national trends support this? Do best practices support this out there? Is the mission and directives of your institution and your division, is the timing right on this? Is what the college says is important going to support this particular move? Alignment is really, really important. Um, Aligning the career services mission and what you want to pull off. Um, does that match really what people are really wanting to see at your institution? Again, it's just important that alignment take place politically. You're never going to get off the launch pad if those above you don't agree with this. Leadership support was absolutely critical for moving this thing down the road. Starting with all the deans at all the colleges here. I had conversations with all of them, first to say, so I have this crazy idea. Do you think it would be helpful? And once they said, yeah, I think that would be helpful, then I start to go to my reporting structure up to the vice president and say, so, I've talked to the deans. They think this is helpful. What do you think? And so, when I started this process 8, 10 years ago, I brought it up, and politically, it just wasn't going to fly. So again, I put it on the shelf until I thought it had a chance. So you have to kind of get the lay of the land there. Local buy-in is huge. Again, if my staff wasn't on board with this, I'm not sure how it ever would have worked. And so I had to be very, very careful to not go through this process faster than they were able to go through this process. Even though I've been thinking about this for a long time, they have been thinking about this for about 5 minutes. And you really have to kind of slow down and just take it easy. Resources are pretty big. It's going to cost some money. My vice president asked me, the first question she asked when I put this out there is, how much is this going to cost me? Which is a valid question. And I looked her straight in the eye and I said, I think I can pull this off with no additional funding from the division. And I thought I could, because I was looking at just realigning and shifting, not necessarily adding and duplicating. As it turns out, it does cost a ton of money to kind of pull this off. Those fancy posters, they're like 25 bucks each. All those flyers are, like $1 each. I mean, it could be in the thousands of dollars just for marketing and branding. Or it could be a lot less than that, depending on how much you have to work with, and what sources of funding you can find to pull this off. We got very involved in corporate grants, alumni donor grants. We reprioritized our funding based on our new alignment and what we said we were going to be about. And frankly, we dropped some things that were costing us money that weren't central to what we thought was our new core. And that's really important. We do a lot of work with our budget here. And if our budget does not align with our mission, either our mission is wrong or we're spending our money unwisely. And so we're constantly looking at how we're spending our money, and we're making decisions to try to save money where we can. And this is a big one. It's just a mountain of energy all day long, every day, nights, weekends, just me personally. It is a lot of time and energy to craft this idea, get it framed up, and then actually implement this thing. But if it was easy, everybody would do it. And I think we've seen some really positive results from this, and I think our efforts have paid off. So in the end, and I think I've got like 1 minute left. My best advice is to not forget to celebrate the successes along the way, but also mourn the losses along the way. When people lose things from their jobs that they identify with, there's true sadness there. There's a sense of loss, and you have to pay attention to that and recognize that, honor that before you move forward. Get some closure. because you don't want things just kind of hanging there, festering, so to speak. Um, for us, it became important to throw everything we do on the table and up for grabs and decide as a group what we're going to keep and what we're going to toss. Um, Institutional buy-in is absolutely critical. And for me, as a director with this idea for a long time and finally having a chance to pull this off, I had to realize that I simply wasn't going to get everything I wanted. Um, there are some things where I said, I think this is the way to go. And unanimously, my staff said, "You're out of your mind. That's just not, right?" So I appreciate that about our group, in that if I have a really bad idea, they're pretty cool with telling me that, and I need that because not all my ideas are good. Um, and so I had to realize, and I did, um, that everything I wanted out of this model wasn't necessarily going to happen, or certainly happen on my timeline. But that's part of compromise and working within a group, obviously. And if you can find the middle ground, I think you can move this forward a lot faster. And so, still looking at my blank screen. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to take those questions via email or phone. Happy to have conversations in the future with you about it. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to accomplish today. I know we had a few moments for questions. I'm just not sure how Anne
Yeah.
wants to manage that.
What I'll do is I will give microphone rights to participants. We can see how it works. If it doesn't, because we've got about 32 people online, we can see how it works. If it doesn't, then they can email you the questions, or they can email me at ahughes@monroecc.edu, and I'll compile all the questions and get them to Gary. And then what we can do is put all of the answers together with the questions and post that online with the webinar link too. So everybody will get to read everybody else's questions as well. But I'm going to give everybody microphone rights at the moment, and we'll see what kind of chaos that brings. So if you have questions, you're more than welcome to ask them right now, because everybody has their microphone should be on. Any questions for Gary?
Hey, Gary, this is Bob Frederick.
Bob,
Ann, are you there?
Yep, I hear, and I think Gary hears you too.
I hear Bob.
Good.
Okay.
All right, Bob.
Oh, okay. So, anyways, how did your staff gain or validate their expertise level, especially with faculty and deans, in order to gain the respect that going from a generalist to an expert takes time? And was there anything you did uniquely to help them develop the expertise needed?
Yeah, great question. We had this pie in the sky idea that every week each one of us would spend a couple of hours at our desk quietly reading journal articles, researching websites, et cetera, which worked for like 12 minutes. And then we just got too busy, as things do when, when your day is too busy, things that can give do, and that became one of those things that just gave out. And so we had to get a little more structured about it. So, for example, Jenny Rojas, Fine and Performing Arts, Media, and Entertainment. She came with some background from San Francisco on that, but she made it her mission. We had lots of conversations about this and whether it was appropriate for her to do this. She just went to event after event after event on campus that faculty were already sponsoring, that her school is already coordinating, with really no career services office value, but huge value for her because she was networking with professionals in her field. And so she would go to a piano recital by someone who comes on campus and have that conversation with that person and faculty and just ask, ask, ask. She probably went to, I don't know, 60 or 70 different events last year as a way of connecting with experts in the field and, just as importantly, connecting with faculty who were sponsoring these programs. Um, I have her going down to a conference in New York City in January, I believe. The entire conference is just for people who work in her industry. So previously I send everybody to the CDO conference, and that's fantastic. It's a great conference, but it can be kind of general. And for Jenny, I need her be good helping that person who wants to be an illustrator or find their way to Broadway. So I have to send her somewhere different. Same with Jackie, who is in fact coordinating the CDO conference, right? So she'll go to that, but Jackie also has to go to the AAEE conference in Nashville next month because that's her world now. And that's how she gets good at what she needs to know. That and a ton of research, meeting with faculty. We've actually asked faculty, so if I want to get really good at this area, what conferences should I go to? What publications should I subscribe to? Which websites do you think I should go to? Um, and so all of us are constantly doing those kinds of things. I remember early on in my career, first job in career services, I had on my appointment schedule someone who wanted to get into law school. And my first thought was, I don't know anything about law school. So I grabbed a book off the shelf, started looking through the chapters and going, okay, just look at the bold text, try to figure this out a little bit so I don't look like an idiot. And some of that happens. But as a result of that, over time, we just start to get way better at what we know. And we develop more and more credibility with faculty. I can't tell you how many faculty have emailed me about Jenny saying she was the hire of the century. She is so accommodating and so inquisitive, and she's becoming the true expert that we need. And so it evolves as a process in a nutshell. Gosh, I hope somebody heard that answer.
Right, I don't. Anybody else have a question? Holly. Go ahead, Holly. I don't hear Holly. Okay. I don't know. She's raised her hand, but I can't. She's not speaking. Holly, are you there? All right. I don't know. Anybody else?
I'd also offer, we had the pleasure of hosting some staff from Monroe Community College a week or two ago. And they just came up
Yes.
and spent a couple of hours with us. And we just talked about the model, and we frankly learned a lot from them as well. If anyone out there is interested in visiting us and speaking to us as a group, we're happy to do that. And it's just a really nice way to get to know people a little bit better too. So we're open to that if that's interesting to anyone.
It was a great experience. We learned so much. We had a great, beautiful day away from the office. Great drive. Foliage was lovely, right? And we learned just a ton of information. And so it was a really wonderful experience. And I'd encourage others who are interested to do that as well. Okay. If no one else has any questions, then what will you, again, you can either email me the questions at ahughes@monroecc.edu, and I'll put them all together and send them off to Gary, or you can email him directly, and we'll have it. If I get the questions, we'll put them up on the SUNY CDO website along with this webinar. So thank you all for attending, and I look forward to more of these kinds of events. Thank you so much, Gary.
Yep, my pleasure. Happy Friday, everyone.
Thanks. Same to you.